Okay, so painting trees, not an easy task if you haven't done it before. I'm going to make it look super simple, and believe me, Bob Ross made it look really easy when I first learned too. If you haven't done it before you start going onto your canvas, I would definitely suggest practicing a couple times on a separate piece of paper, like so. Just a scrap piece of paper will work just fine. I always have my students do like 10 of these before they go on to their actual paintings. So you RVA students are no different. Now I personally like to use a smaller flat brush when I do more of a pine tree, and like I was showing you guys before, give it a hairdo. So I've got a wet brush and I've given it a hairdo, so I've got a nice crisp edge. Some people really dig doing this with a fan brush. It's kind of a matter of preference and practice. So play around with that before you go into this. I'm taking black, okay, and hopefully you guys can see this right here. When I do this, you can kind of see here, when I do this, I want to make sure that my tree is long and thin. Okay, most pine trees are going long and thin. It wouldn't be big and fat at the bottom. They're not a triangular shape. We're seeing some of the different needles and definition in the tree. Okay, I'm going to go in even now with a smaller flat brush with an even pointier edge. So I've got an even crisper edge that I'm giving this brush a hairdo. And I'm going to go in with my black so you can kind of see another example. And I'm just going to kind of hold this and paint at the same time, so hopefully you can see this. But again, this is something I would practice several times. I always say to my students, leave some room for the star on the top of that Christmas tree. Starting small, a little bit bigger. You're working out. Okay, now we can get a little bit bigger, 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 bigger. Good. I can go back in then and establish a little bit more. Okay, that's how I paint trees. One thing I will say, that when you're first practicing this, sometimes you have a tendency to do what I call the Frankenstein stitches. You got a line, and then you go like that. Looks like Frankenstein stitches. You just want to make sure that we're getting more of the angles. Think of the tree, okay? You know, it sometimes helps to look at one. We've got that top. Remember, leave a little bit for the star on top. Then we're going down and establishing branches. But they're not always going to be right across from each other. Not always going to be Frankenstein stitches, one right after another. So, you know, think about nature. And trees, even pine trees, they do kind of tendency to grow up. The boughs might get heavy in the winter with different weights of the snow on them, but they want to grow up. So think about that when you're painting these trees. Okay? Practice, I would say 10 times before you go on to your painting. When you're ready to go on to your painting, go for it. Now, where we left off on this painting was, I got my Aurora Borealis craziness in there, okay? And one of the things that I am going to do now too is I'm actually going to paint in kind of a mountain here. So right here, I'm going to go in and paint a mountain. Okay, and I'm going to add a little bit of black into there where sometimes you're seeing some of the shadows. My spritz bottle is not far away from me, so I'm going to go ahead and spritz that. blurring out some of this bottom stuff. I want some of that in there because I liked the way that sky looked there. Okay, good. That's where my ground meets the sky. Horizon lines. A little more. Okay, soften that up a little bit. Good. Got my mountain. Now I am ready to go ahead and put down some of my trees. I'm going to start kind of vague. So when I'm painting this, okay, so you guys can see this, I'm just going to start with some smaller trees in the background. And I'm just using my flat brush and just adding some various trees. Okay, so I'm going to keep on doing more of that and establishing more of a foreground down here. And then I can get to some more detailed trees using my detail brush too. So, layer upon layer of trees there. And then as things get closer to us, we should be starting to see more details. So over here, I'm actually going to do some really detailed trees. Okay, so another brush that I want you guys to see is a detail brush. You probably got something like this, or you got a liner. This is a liner brush or a detail brush. So the first thing that I always do is get it wet. I do not ever do anything with a detail brush or a liner brush without getting it wet. So I dipped it in my water, and then my paint, in this case we're just sticking with our black, is really watered down as well. Okay, and I decided right here I want to put some more realistic trees that are kind of coming off of the paper. So in order to do that, it's painting like we haven't done before. It's branches are down and then up. We paint little tiny branches with this style. What I want you to think about is not necessarily that we have a tendency to paint like this. You really want to just use the tip of the brush and control how much of that brush you're actually using. Think about the tree itself. Each little branch that comes off is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And you really don't want your tree, any limb, to actually be bigger than the branch that it came from. So when you're painting like this, you're just really trying to branch off smaller, 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 smaller. And I tell my students, if there is not just a ton of little branches on there, you're not doing it right. Now, I don't want you to go insane putting little branches on there, but think about the tree. Think about, we want it to be a healthy tree. We want it to have lots of little different branches on it. Now, and this is another example of why I said it's really important to paint, layer back and then come up. Could you imagine trying now to paint in between these little branches that I'm just painting? Impossible. Okay? Think about all those little branches, just trying to get so many. Those are the details. When you look at a painting and you see all these little details, that's the stuff that you're like, oh, how do you do that? Okay, liner brush, really watered down paint. Okay, so and then I'm just, the last little detail, I mean, I could play with this forever, and as an artist, that's what we do, right?